In terms of the financial keys on this calculator, when we talk about the financial keys, we're talking about all the keys in this top row. So it's all the keys that appear in white and also the functions that appear in yellow below. We'll use them at different times, but those are the keys that we're talking about. So if we look at the financial keys a little more closely, so this is what we see. So let's see, N, I per year, PV, payment, and future value, and so on. So these are the financial keys that we're dealing with. So in general, your financial keys work like this. So if you enter a piece of information into any one of your financial keys, you enter a piece of information to N or PV or payment, whatever you enter in there stays in there. If you turn the calculator off or if the calculator turns itself off, all that information stays in there. So it works like memory keys in that regard. So you enter something, it stays in there. The only way to remove it would be to clear all or enter a new piece of information. You can use the keys in any order. The calculator doesn't care. So you can start with N and go from left to right, any order you like. So in terms of the calculator, it doesn't care which order the information is entered in. Now when I do the calculations, I'll show you a very specific way I enter them, and I enter them in a certain order wherever I can because I care about matching. And I'll talk about matching a little bit later on. The calculator doesn't care. Each key only stores one specific type of number or piece of information. Well, that's probably obvious. The N wants N information, the present value wants present value information, future value wants future value information. So that makes sense. So we have to take great care in entering the right kind of information in the right key. The way that we do most of our mortgage finance calculations is if we know 5 pieces of information, we can calculate the 6th unknown. And by 5, I mean the keys that appear in black on the slide, N, I per year, PV, payment, and future value. That's 5. And the 6th is the periods per year, which shows up below the payment key. So when I talk about entering 5 pieces of information and calculating the 6th unknown, those are the keys I'm talking about. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, if we wanted to clear all the keys, we can shift clear all. That will clear everything except the periods per year. And you can use that if you like to. I tend not to use the clear all function because whenever I start a mortgage finance calculation or perform a mortgage finance calculation, I'll be sure to put a new piece of information into 5 of the keys. Whatever was stored in each of those keys before simply disappears. And then I'll calculate the 6th. So I never need to clear anything because I'm putting a new piece of information in every key every time. Now, one of the keys that's not directly associated with the mortgage finance keys is this RCL key. Now, if you look just above the 7 on your calculator, you'll see the RCL key. So the RCL stands for recall, and it's actually used for some other memory keys which we haven't covered. But the recall key also works with all of your mortgage finance keys. So the way this key works is, if you wanted to see what you've got stored in N, you hit recall and then N. And what's stored in N appears on the screen. If you wanted to see what was stored in payment, you hit recall payment. And what's stored in payment shows up on the screen. The reason this key is important is, if you do a calculation and you get an answer that's different from the rest of us, also known as a wrong answer, if that happens, can happen, if that happens, what most people do is they clear everything and they start from scratch, you enter everything again, and you try the calculation again. Well, if you do that, there's a good chance you might make the same mistake the second time you made the first time. So don't do that. What you should do, if you get an answer wrong, use your recall key to see what's stored in each of your financial keys. Because probably you've just got one piece of information wrong. So you haven't gotten 5 pieces of information wrong, you've just got one piece of information wrong. So you've isolated your error. You found out where you went wrong. So you've learned something. To correct the error, you simply enter the right number into that key and recalculate your answer. So it's a way to isolate your error, learn where you went wrong, enter a new piece of information, and quickly get the right answer. So that's a really useful key to use if you get an answer wrong. So in general, that's how these keys work. So let's look a bit more specifically at these keys. So let's look at the interest rate per year key first. So this I/YR, this is our interest rate key. This is our nominal interest rate key. This is where we enter our nominal interest rates. It's entered as a percent. So if you have an interest rate of 10, you would enter 10 in the interest rate per year key, not as a decimal. So this is your nominal rate. This is where we enter the interest rate. The next key, and this is how I typically enter information, I'll enter the interest rate per year first, and then the periods per year next, because the periods per year are directly associated with that interest rate. So P/YR is the periods per year. That's the compounding frequency. So if we had an interest rate in a question that said J2 equals 10%, I'd enter 10 as interest rate per year, and immediately I'd enter 2, because it's J2, 2 shift periods per year. Because those two pieces of information are typically associated with each other, they go together in the question most of the time, let's enter them together. So that's how I typically do it. Then if I can, I would enter N next. So N is time. N is a number of compounding periods or payment periods. So that's the total number. So if we had monthly periods and it was a 2-year loan, it'd be 12 months the first year, 12 months the second year, that's 24. So N is the total number of compounding periods. Now one of the keys in entering N is that N has to be expressed in the same frequency as the periods per year. So what does that mean? So it means if the periods per year are monthly, we entered 12 as our periods per year, that means that N must also be months. It has to match up. So when we talk about matching, we're talking about the period per year frequency. If it's monthly, N has to be in months. The periods per year is in weeks, N has to be in weeks. It has to match up. Periods per year is 12, and N is in months. So we'll pay lots of attention to the idea about matching. PV, present value, we've talked a little bit about that. So the present value is the value today. If we calculate a present value, that's called discounting. So you'll see that term used from time to time. And the other term for the future is future value. We mentioned that a little bit earlier. If we calculate the future value, we're compounding. We used the word compounding a little bit earlier as well. The last key, part of these 6, is the payment key. So the payment key, this is the payment per period. It also has to match. So it's expressed in the same frequency as the period per year and N. So if N and the periods per year are in months, then the payment we calculate will be the payment per month. Has to be, because it has to match up. So periods per year, N, and payment frequency will always match up. And we'll pay lots of attention to that as we go through the examples.